The connection, however, has to be I'm exuding the wholeness
Yeah.
or the holiness. Like I'm walking in that. And I
Yeah.
know that I'm walking in it because I've had people comment, just say things in front of me, and I haven't said anything.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm so happy to welcome Pamela Stokes Eggleston. Let me tell you a little bit about her as we start off here. So Pamela Stokes Eggleston is the director of the Kripalu School of Integrative Yoga Therapy. She is also the founder of Yoga2Sleep, co-founder of Retreat to Spirit, and adjunct faculty at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. Pamela is a wellness consultant, advisor, national speaker, certified yoga therapist, Reiki master, and end-of-life doula with specialized training in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia and trauma-informed yoga to work with service members, veterans, their caregivers, and insomnia sufferers. She is a contributing editor of Best Practices for Yoga with Veterans and Yoga and Resilience, Empowering Practices for Survivors of Sexual Trauma. Pamela's writing and work has been featured with Yoga Therapy Today, Gaiam, Military Spouse Magazine, Yoga Journal, Mantra Yoga and Health, Essence, the Huffington Post, and on Ellen and MSNBC. She is the author of You Are the Pendulum, Poems and Practices for an Unsettling World. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're so happy to hear what you have to say and share with us. I thought we could just start at the beginning, though. So I'm curious about anything about your background really you want to share and how you got into this work, this contemplative work, meditative work, yoga work, any and all of it.
Wow. Well, let's see. I have been a yoga practitioner for over 20 years. So I had been a student of yoga, practicing at different studios and trying out different yoga styles. My first introduction was through Anusara yoga, that style of yoga. And I recognized that I felt better overall in general. So even when I didn't know the science and I was going to studios as a student, I recognized that I felt better. I handled conflict a little bit better. So it stuck with me. And throughout that period, I didn't think about actually becoming a yoga teacher, but I had a few people say, you might want to consider yoga teacher training. And so I completed my yoga teacher training, my 200-hour around 2011 or so. And then I just went on to do 500-hour. I did therapeutic yoga specific to veterans. I did lots of trauma-informed yoga training and subsequently became a certified yoga therapist. And so my journey it's been years in the making. I also am, I am an insomnia sufferer. And so I was noticing that certain types of yoga nidra, restorative yoga helped me sleep a little better. And so I gravitated towards using some of that in my work and just for myself personally.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about a couple pieces, just briefly, because I don't know if people are as familiar with what an end-of-life doula does. They probably heard doula around birthing, and
Mm-hmm.
also yoga therapy in the sense of is that more like a physical therapist, or are there other pieces to it as well?
Sure. So end of life doula, and a lot of people are saying end of life doula because people were saying death doula, and folks have issues around the word death. Um, Even though I think as a society we're all going to die. So my belief is we need to learn how to live with death, and in that way, um, we're all dying. So it's like, how can we make the best of our lives right now? Tim McGraw has this wonderful song that he dedicated to his father. I don't know if you've heard it, Sonia. It's like "Live Like You Were Dying." It's the most beautiful song ever, and it's like it was an ode to his father. And I think when his father was sick, and so that's kind of the energy. And when I took my um, death doula training, it was during the pandemic when my mother-in-law passed from COVID. And I was shocked to discover that that kind of triggered me and my own mother dying when I was in my 20s. And I was like, oh, what is this? You know, you feel like grief has so many layers. And sometimes you not forget that that person's not there, but you kind of go on with your life. Right. And then, so there was some stuff that came up for me and I was like, oh, I want to explore this more. And I had friends who are end of life doulas, who work in hospice, who work in palliative care, who work in hospitals. So an end of life doula can do anything from hospice work to hospital work to helping you set up estate planning to working with a friend who, was at the end, towards the end of life with stage 5 cancer, for example, to help them manage their nervous system. So there's lots of, it's a broad array as it relates to a career. And some of the tools I learned as a yoga teacher and yoga therapist, I can use as an end of life doula. If somebody wants me, for instance, to just hold space for them as they process some of these emotions, as they move towards the end of their life.
So it sounds like you work with both the family potentially and the person who's dying. Okay.
Absolutely. The families are often in the room while that person is there, and that person often is ready to go. My friend who speaks about her hospice work, it's always about the family really gripping on, holding on. Because as a society, we haven't learned when we need to let go, when we need to set up space for that person to be allowed to let go. I learned that in my life. When my mother died, I was gripping tight, right? This was, I was gripping so hard. And even before I thought about becoming a doula years ago, when my grandmother passed, I said, I'm going to do this differently. My grandmother was 91 when she passed. I said, I'm going to be there for her when I can be there. And when she was in hospice, I gave her foot massages and hand massages. She used to like that. And I felt like she was giving me this look. And I remember this look that my mother gave me when she was telling me where she wanted to be buried and stuff before. And that was the last time she was conscious. And it was the same look. And so I know that sounds weird, Sonia, but it was the same look. And so this look was, I'm ready.
Yeah.
This is what my grandmother gave me, right? So I said, I gave her a hand massage, foot massage. I kissed her, I hugged her, and I said, I love you. And I walked out of the room. 2 days later, my father's calling me that morning. It was like a Saturday. And I remember it distinctly because my husband and I were supposed to go to a luncheon and something told me, don't go to the luncheon, right?
Yeah.
I didn't go. I went to see my grandmother one last time. And then 2 days later, my father's calling me, letting me know that she had passed. So it is real. And I felt like, okay, this is the kind of send off I want. This is the kind of send off yes, people will be sad, they'll miss you, but I'm going to be in the ether. I'm going to be all around. So that's end of life doula. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and
beautiful.
So the yoga therapist, that was a different journey. I feel like I was like, why do I need to do that? I had been a yoga teacher for a while, but this idea of therapeutic yoga kept coming up. And then yoga therapy kept coming up. So yeah, a lot of people are confused by physical therapists, which focuses on physical movement and things like that. And I have a couple of colleagues who are in fact physical therapists and yoga therapists, because there is a distinct difference. So yoga therapists generally, I'm just going to keep it short, use body, mind, emotion, soul, spirit characteristics to assess a client with a chronic condition. So that condition could be cancer. That condition could be, let me think of some of my clients, MS. That condition could be anxiety or stress. That condition could be breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And using that totality to assess how they are in their bodies, hearts, minds, and souls. doing musculoskeletal assessment, doing assessment of the breath, because as we know in yoga, it's very important to breathe fully and deeply. And so if you assess the breath in a way, and this is all done, in a session, that can tell you a lot about somebody's temperament and emotional state. And so that's what drew me to yoga therapy.
Yeah, and it makes just so much sense to me, having done so much breath work, that emotions come up with the breath. I mean, the body is all linked in, the breath's linked in, all of it is so linked together, which leads me actually really naturally into the next question. I talk so much about wholeness. Sometimes I call it holiness with the WH because of, it's just so holistic, really. Our mind likes
Mm-hmm.
to categorize things, and sometimes we try to heal in one particular methodology, which is fine, but really it's like all integrated. But I'm curious, what does wholeness mean to you?
To me, wholeness means harmony and completeness throughout the body, throughout the heart space, the mind, soul, and spirit. I think wholeness is it's a felt sense of oneness that often can't be explained, but that people can viscerally feel, right? It's a connection with everything and all things on a molecular level and a universal level. I think that's what wholeness. I like how you say holiness,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's all of it, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's what it means to me when I think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious too, because I want to hear more anyway about your work with Yoga2Sleep. It's such a, big part of what you do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, how does that play in? Because I think oftentimes people would think of that as so specific. But again, our sleep is really all related to everything else in our
Mm-hmm.
lives and our bodies and emotions and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a recovering insomniac. So, and I love naps. So I'm like, I think sleep is so critically important. And all of this talk about I'll sleep when I'm dead. I think Margaret Thatcher said this. And, you know, everybody wants to surpass sleep, which helps us recharge. 1/3 of our lives is spent sleeping, 1/3. So that's really, to me, that's critical. That's important. And if you're not getting enough, whether it be through stress, whether it be through perimenopause or menopause, whether it be through PTSD or any other ailments that you may have, sleep depletes you, or the lack of sleep depletes you. And so I thought it was important to say yoga to sleep. And then people say, well, are you just doing yoga nidra, which is a practice of you're laying down, getting a restoration and rest, and also um, shifting consciousness all at the same time. I'm like, you could do restorative, you could do yin yoga, you could do some mindfulness and meditative practices that employ the tools, the ancient tools of yoga, through the breath, through contemplation, that can get you to sleep. So I use all of those things in my business, in my work with clients, in any group work that I'm doing, any workshops that I do with yoga to sleep. So
Yeah. So really, there's a lot of different individualization, it sounds like, for what works for
yes.
people. There's a lot of different tools and methods that can help. Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm
Exactly.
wondering, because this feels related to me, about nervous system regulation. I guess simply because, at least for me, if I have a really bad night's sleep, I have more trouble the next day regulating my nervous system. So I guess that's why it's popping into my mind at this point in the interview. So yeah, so many people have trouble with that, either because of things like that are going on, or it's a bad night's sleep. Sometimes it's just that it's more difficult in the moment, right? Like if we're feeling reactive in the moment, or we've gotten dysregulated, that can be difficult. So I'm wondering, maybe, practice in general, of course, helps. It's having some sort of practice, because then it's more familiar to get into the regulated state. But I'm curious to hear your favorite practices, maybe particularly for what would help people in the moment.
In the moment, I think breath is important. I think we're going to breathe until we're not here anymore. And I think people pass over how they can use the breath and breath practices to downregulate their nervous system. So when we're in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, where our breathing changes. But when we can activate the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, we can calm things down a little bit. We can do that in the car. When you're in traffic and you want to flip somebody off because they cut you off, can you take a deep breath and count to 3 and hold for 3 and exhale for 3? Mm-hmm. And then maybe do that 3 times. And it alleviates the edge a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it downregulates your nervous system. So it helps the nervous system calm itself in that moment. So I remember growing up and just being a kid and running outside and, being bullied and coming to my mother and trying to say things to her. And she was like, calm down, take a deep breath. I mean, she didn't know, she didn't know it was yoga. She didn't know it was, but she knew something about the breath that could help calm down so that I would be able to speak and share what had happened to me. Right. So I think we gloss over that tool that we have at our disposal so readily to be able to do in the grocery store, right? At the park, anywhere, with family members who kind of push our edges, who we have some issues around, who activate our nervous system in ways that aren't good for us. How can we handle those moments, right? So I think I think movement helps. If you like dance, that's great. If you like asana, yoga postures, that's a great way to downregulate the nervous system as well. So there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah, I think some of it is a matter of trying it and then not sort of trying it just once and giving up, because I think you're right. Sometimes we disregard it, even though it's advice that we've heard, especially maybe around taking a deep breath. But are we really doing it? Are we really trying to do that?
Right.
Because I think sometimes, it does feel when you're in that state, like, because of the nature of it, like it feels like you're not going to be able to get out of it. I think that's part of the trick of it too. It's like it doesn't feel like that's going to work. So it's sort of, I think it's true. A matter of trying it.
It's true. And the more trauma you have or you haven't dealt with or you're dealing with, and the harder it is to do that, and the more consistent practices have to be. So I think often in the wellness space, people think, oh, we can just wave a magic wand. I'm a healer, quote unquote, and I can help you get rid of this trauma. And that's more of a process, and that's more of a cyclical kind of choppy voyage that each person in their own space and time has to go through. Right. So yoga and breath work and meditation may help, and you may need a good therapist, right? To talk through some of these issues. So the whole package of what your wholeness, your wellness will be to help regulate the nervous system will be contingent upon how you dealt with trauma, how you dealt with past childhood trauma, intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, all of those things, and how you deal with stress and anxiety in your current life. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's good to talk about what you do in the moment, but there are those pieces that are the bigger and the more cyclical and the that also need to be dealt with. That, of course, do play in. I'm curious too to hear. I think we can understand that if we're more regulated, we're going to have better relationships with other people. But even beyond that, like in all kinds of ways that are around this wholeness and the way you described it and defined it for yourself, how do you think that affects and relates to our connection with others, whether it's the closer relationships or whether it's more societal and like us as part of the greater whole?
That's a good question. I think if you're dysregulated and you walk into a room of regulated people, some of those people are going to get thrown off. Or conversely, if you're regulated and you walk into a room, excuse me, of unregulated people, how they're going to throw you off. And so it'll be critical to know where you are in your journey as it relates to that regulation. I think in terms of our connections with others, it's critical to really truly know yourself in this whole space of body, mind, spirit. So many people are walking around and they don't really know who they are. They're not following their passion, or as Paulo Coelho says in The Alchemist, your personal legend. Like, what is your personal legend? And are you truly following it? And so many of us aren't. That we are working at places to pay a mortgage, which I understand. However, if we are so far removed often from why we were, excuse me, put on this earth, then we can't even, we feel like it's so far away that we can't attain it, nor can we entertain doing something that is our life's purpose. It's why universe put us here on the planet. So I think that's important, to have connection. I think it's important to have not mirrors, but like-minded people around us to support us. I have a community of, sister friends who are yoga teachers, Pilates teachers, meditation herbalists, all of the things that support me in what I want to do and how I move and live as it relates to being a better human being on the planet. And I think connections with people who may not be like us may be harder, but we have to be that example. So often we're in this space, Sonia, and we want to tell all the people, listen, this worked for me, so it's going to work for you. And we want to tell all the people, especially if they're in our family, I know this will work for you, and I know this. And I'm going to tell you that's the hardest thing to learn on this path is you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make them drink, right? So you cannot. And it's been hard for me because you see family members sick and things like that. And so I've had some family members actually reach out to me and ask, and they've done things and they've empowered themselves to heal themselves in the way that they want as they're in their body. So that's been beautiful. But if they don't ask you, we don't need to volunteer. And that's really hard. That's been hard for me anyway. The connection, however, has to be, I'm exuding the wholeness, or the holiness. Like I'm walking in that. And I know that I'm walking in it because I've had people comment, just say things in front of me, and I haven't said anything.
Yeah.
I'm a plant-based, I'm plant-based, for instance. And I've had people get in front of me and just say, I can't stop eating meat, whatever. And I'm just like, I'm looking around like, did I say anything about that? No. And I'm not going to, because it depends on what your constitution is. What is to me, I did it for healing reasons. I didn't do it to save the animals. But, but for me, I healed myself and I had evidence of eating plants that I healed myself.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago. So I'm like, once I saw it, I was like, there's no going back for me because I experienced that. I can't tell my husband who likes fish, who wants to keep eating whatever, to do that. I mean, that's, that would be self-serving. You have to figure out what's best for your body and what works for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to pull out a couple of points from what you said, starting sort of with that last part. I think, it almost feels paradoxical, but it's not really, of course, that it is like about us and kind of that focus on ourselves. And then from there it exudes out, but that doesn't mean navel gazing, right? It doesn't mean that. That is how, and I think your example is so profound because there is this holistic way we all communicate and interconnect. So it still does have that influence. And then the people, of course, with an offering or whatever, whatever that is, whatever kind of healing, do seem to find you anyway, right? They'll be drawn to that. But that it's it's not that we can sort of game it and say like, okay, this person, I'm going to tell you what your journey is. Yeah. So it's such a good example, like I think too, of the people just knowing and having that connected thing there. And the other piece, let's see, what was it I was going to bring up? Oh, the part about your community. I guess it's sort of parallel in a way. Like, I think sometimes people get really like divided, almost like, you can't have sort of your own community that's supporting you and also be the person who's open to everyone and trying to, and I think that like how you're describing that, it's similar, right? Like I think it's like, it doesn't mean we maybe don't do other work in the world or interact with other people, but to understand what we need ourselves so we can be that person who's walking in our alignment or a wholeness and exuding it, right? So it's not, I think we always are trying to make divisions like that, right? And like go into the dualities. But I think, yeah, I just wanted to point to that as a good description of how that can be important. And it's not counter to the other thing.
Right.
In fact,
right.
it's supportive of the other thing. So
yeah. It does support that. I think also you need balance in that connectivity. So if you only surround yourself with people who only vote a certain way and you don't want to have discussions about why people feel a certain way, about any conflicts or anything going on, then that's short-sighted too. Now, if it gets to a point where, and I think in this country, we've gone through, pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID tumult as it relates to, I'll say, structures being dismantled. That is very hard for everyone.
Yeah.
Particularly if you've bought into the American dream. It is so hard to see. And so you see this, what do we call it, in yoga, parigraha, you see this grasping. And what we want to practice is non-grasping, not the holding on to. This is how it's always been done. That means, well, we got to move past this is how it's always been done, because especially COVID should have shown us this. And what's been amazing to me is people just fall back into the same patterns as pre-COVID. It's like, no, we don't need to do everything in person. We can create a synchronous, asynchronous, hybrid kind of protocol to be able to do business. Like, there's ways to still do it and to make people feel like they're valued. And what I found that happened with people in connection, I witnessed it here in the DC metro area, is people are like, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going into the office, and we're going to band together. This was community. And this was at a local newspaper here, a magazine. And I saw it play out in real time, because the CEO was like, oh, I'm going to bring everybody back in the office. And they were like, no, you're not. And it was like 25 of them said, no, we're not coming back in. We're not. What you going to do? It's like a mutiny, or I don't know, whatever. But, I enjoyed, watching that, because I was like, they don't need to, what do you need to be in the office for all the time? Water cooler conversation, pizza parties, like nobody cares about that. They like the work that they're doing. Let them enjoy it while they put a load of laundry in the washing machine. Work productivity went up when people came home during COVID. It went up. So what are you saying?
Yeah.
So I think communities in different ways. The outpouring of when George Floyd was murdered in other countries, in New Zealand, for crying out loud, it was beautiful. And I think if you believe in community, you will continue that work. You will continue to work for labor rights, workers' rights. You'll continue the work for women's rights and racial equality and equity. You'll continue that work if that's your community. You'll continue the work if you like to garden and you're an environmentalist. That you'll continue that work, and you'll find your people. And even if people are struggling to understand, well, why do I need to recycle, or why should I plant a tree? Then be willing to bring them in with baby steps to explain why this is going to help not only you, but your children and your children's children. So I think, connection, I think people crave it. And if they don't have practices to regulate nervous system activation, then it's the grasping. Right. And that's where we get in trouble. It's the grasping in
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's interesting to bring that all together. The non-grasping community in various ways and how it plays out in the world, and nervous system regulation. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is reminding me of the title of your book. You Are the Pendulum:
Mm-hmm.
Complex Practices for an Unsettling World. So maybe we'll shift over into your writing and how you share that as well, because you also have the Substack, some prose and poem.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to share your writings in that way, or even to write in the first place? I'm curious.
Oh, well, I've been writing poetry since I've been 5. I say that in the book that I just was writing bad poetry for my mother. And throughout my life, I've encountered some great English teachers and some horrible English teachers who told me, I wasn't a good writer and things like that, but I knew better. And I think it's a skill, it's like a muscle that you can develop. And so for me, poetry is a way to express emotion or feelings or sensations about what's going on in and around me. And Substack was a perfect platform. And I can't remember who told me about Substack, but I have several friends who have newsletters on Substack. And I was like, I'm going to use this as a blog. They said it's a newsletter, but I said, old school, I'm going to use it as a blog and just put my writings there. So some of the writings that are in the book, I put out and tested on Substack. Some writings are specifically for Substack. Some writings are from older poems I've done years ago. Some writings are from poets that I love. Edgar Allan Poe, Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson, Rita Dove, different poets I'll just showcase. And so it's really a nice platform for me. And I can tell I love it because I'm always on trying to figure out how to post and what types of posts to do. So it doesn't feel like it's laborious to me or, like a standard newsletter. This feels nice. And so I love posting there. I post there regularly. I talked about my book there. And the writing, just for me, I like to read too. So I feel like it helps me to make sense of the world around me.
Yeah. Well, and I have experienced the offerings that you have on there, where it's this sort of meditative, contemplative experience, which hopefully will pretty shortly we'll experience ourselves here. How did you come to have the idea to do that? What's your experience been with it, with how people respond to it, and your own experience with it?
Oh, Substack, people love it. I have people, oh my goodness, I want to share. I have a few paid subscribers. I feel like I've been supported in that way. And I didn't start out with, oh, I want to have paid subscribers. I wanted a space where I could share my writing, where I could share my thoughts, where I could share, like, I have a quote of the month, where I can share other writers and kind of have those things lend themselves to what's going on with me, my community, and the world
Yeah.
in a way that felt non preachy and would help people contemplate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
Hmm.
interesting because when you do the readings, and you know one takes it in that way, where you really slow down to take it in and process it. I think that's what led me to my next question, because I think I'm also a writer, and sometimes I feel like words out in the world, especially maybe, but even in writing, can feel almost like a barrier, right? Like how to convey what we really
Hmm.
mean. Poetry often like
Hmm.
does seem to get, a, you know, a little more easily beyond that. But I'm curious about how you think that. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like for how words can sort of reach us and connect us, even though sometimes they can feel like a barrier.
I do feel words are good connectors. I feel when they are often barriers, it's because we aren't using the right words, or sometimes we need silence.
Mm,
So often we're putting words in spaces where there needs to be silence. And then that can be a contemplative space as well. And I think in this world that we're in now, a lot of people can't sit in stillness, can't sit and be and listen to birds, listen to the wind, the breeze, or listen to themselves by being still and silent. And so when I find often I'm trying to force something, a poem or something, I walk away from it. Sometimes these things come to me in spurts where I'm like, it's like incredible downloads of 3 poems, and then weeks could go by, and I have to know that that's, for me, that's what it's going to be. And part of that is allowing for the stillness to say the thing or things that need to be said. The stillness conveys the feelings or beliefs or emotions. It is in that space of silence that illuminates the processes by which communication, whether verbal or nonverbal, can be explored.
Yeah, that stillness element, that's so important to bring in. I'm about to ask you to do a reading for us, but I just want to say when we're done with that, because we're getting towards the end of our time, when we're done with that, I'll still ask if you have any final words, and I'll make sure that we can hear where people can find you.
Oh, sure.
But do you feel ready? Do you want to do
Yeah,
it?
sure. So this is, I have my book here.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's see. I put, there's a poem in my book called Brushfire. So I'm going to read Brushfire.
Okay.
In the thick of the bush, a small ember blows in on the wind, catches, burns. The wind spreads the flames. The breeze lifts the smoke. The air carries the silt and ashes away in a drift dance. This fire is a fire to burn away the edges, to sear the borders. These borders are crumbling. Its walls can no longer stand. The fires have destroyed the edges, the limitations, the normal that never existed. The flame's light shines on the ultimate truth. The brush fire burns a new way for those that can stand the heat.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to listen to that again too, because I think as doing it as a practice to calm our nervous systems and as a meditative practice, that was new to me, and discovering your Substack, but it's a beautiful practice. And then those words can sink in more deeply, and you sort of feel the different, even on each reading, can feel the different meanings sort of sink in, almost viscerally.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And
You're welcome.
Any final thoughts for us, or where can we find you?
Well, let's see. You can find me at Some Prose in a Poem on Substack. You can also find me on yoga2sleep.com. That's yoga, the number 2sleep.com. I'm also on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Be Well with Pamela. And yeah, if you want any help or anything trying to work towards contemplation in a different and unique way, I can help you with that. So thank you, Sonia, for allowing me to share.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I think hopefully it's also giving people some ideas about, other tools available to them, and some of these ways that things are more integrated and holistic, I think, as well. But, perhaps some tools that they haven't heard of before. And I'll put all of that information in the description box as well. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're so welcome.